and Councillor Jake. So both Jake and myself have spoken about it, and he's happy for me to chair. So is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, just to confirm, I'd certainly be happy with that. If on this occasion now I'm chairing the CJC board, if that's permitted, I'd be very happy to provide ongoing support to Clive in that role. Sarah, sorry, there's me chairing.
Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I just note that there's no membership from Banau Brycheiniog. Is that okay with the group, or does that pose a quandary in terms of quorum, etc.?
As in councillors, I will go back and double check with Clive Pinney, monitoring officer, whether we're quorum if we haven't got a councillor. Okay.
Okay.
I'll carry on in the background. I presume that's more for if decisions are being made.
Yeah,
yes, that's right. Yeah.
Just to confirm, it wasn't an issue this morning at the CJC board. There were only the two principal authorities present at a member level.
Okay, we'll carry on and give us an update then, Kath.
Will do. Yes, Chair.
Yeah. So okay, so thanks for everyone for turning up this afternoon. So first item is welcome. So welcome everyone, and any formal apologies to note then for this meeting.
I have apologies from Councillor Gareth Ratcliffe, and Councillor Jake had received apologies from Councillor D. Jones. Councillor Gareth D. Jones, yes, from Powys. I'm not aware of any other apologies. And councillors, we have apologies from Peter Morris from Powys County Powys Council, who is an officer. Sorry.
Okay. There's no other apologies being given to myself, so we'll crack on with item 2 on the agenda then, which is the regional discussion status of local development plans. So this paper, I think, or this discussion, is anyone on the officer side leading on this, just to take us through this?
I'll take you through it, Clive. That's fine.
Okay, if you go on to it then, Sarah, over to you.
Okay, so this was an opportunity for partners around the table to just give an update on where they are with their current replacement local development plan. And I'll start with Ceredigion, if that's okay. From a Ceredigion point of view, we placed our replacement LDP on pause following the riverine guidance for SACs in approximately October 2021. We went on formal pause. We continue to keep that under review. We were, until recently, keeping it on pause as a result of the expected marine guidance, and that remains the case really. I'll go into a little bit about the marine guidance in another agenda point, but from a Ceredigion perspective, we're still keeping our options open given we're part of the West Wales Nutrient Management Board and we're aware of the situation down there. And obviously we still have a plan that doesn't have a drop dead date, so there is no statutory obligation on us to we don't have a fall down, if you like. We've got our fallback position, and that is the LDP, and that still remains quite a lot of opportunities for development in the county with our existing LDP. So, and our policies, we've done an assessment, they accorded Future Wales. So given we have Future Wales and a no drop dead date plan, we're content with the situation at present, but we keep it under review. So I'm going to pass you over to one of the officers from Banau Brycheiniog, and they can give you a brief update on their current situation.
Okay, who are we going to have then? Gareth or Chris?
I'll take it if you want, Gareth, if that's okay.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, no worries. So our existing local development plan, like Ceredigion's, has no drop dead dates. But it was a plan period from 2007 to 2022. We've just finished consulting on a draft delivery agreement for a new, for preparing a new plan, a 20-year plan between 2025 and 2045, with the view to commencing preparation after the summer. So we haven't taken the responses to that consultation back to our members yet. We're hoping to do that in September, and all being well, we'll submit the delivery agreement for preparing a new local development plan to the Welsh Government for its consideration, with a view to commencing work in the not too distant future.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And from Powys' point of view then, got an officer there to give us an update on their progress?
Yeah, myself
Daniel,
or
yeah, you happy?
Adrian.
Yeah.
Do you wanna-
Daniel.
We've got a choice. Oh, I can do it if you want. It's fine. I'll step in.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks everyone. So yes, the Powys adopted LDP ends in 2026. So we are currently in the stage of the Powys the replacement LDP 22 to 2037. So a delivery agreement was agreed by Powys Council and Welsh Government. A preparation commenced in July 2022. The preferred strategy was consulted publicly up until October 24. Deposit plan consultation is planned for late 2025. So that's where we currently are at the moment. Following which the replacement LDP will be submitted to Welsh Government for examination in public by an independent planning inspector. So that's the current timetable we're working to. In terms of some of the key actions at the moment, green infrastructure, Gypsy, Roma traveller sites, and Adrian is probably one other thing I've forgotten as well. So apologies if I have.
We have to consider the new national park, which is in the background as well.
Of course, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Okay, so we've had an update on all three LDPs, SDP developments at the moment. So we're all at different stages, I suppose. Are there any valid points that some of the members want to bring up here at this point? No? Any questions for the officers? I've got no questions because I know I'm fully aware of the situation, certainly with Powys and Ceredigion. I wasn't so aware of the Banau Brycheiniog situation. And I can see from the chat, so we're not current at the moment. So,
No, Chair.
fair enough. Okay, well, we'll carry on and you know, we'll go through the different papers and we'll just have to see where we go with this. And you know, we need an update, definitely. I'm afraid we can't abandon this meeting. So we'll move on to the next item then, seeing that there's no questions on that item. Item 3 then is the Marine SAC. I know there's quite a lot of activity been happening recently. This obviously affects a small area of Powys. Yes, you have got a coastline as well. And more obviously with Ceredigion. So is that over to you, Sarah, then?
Yes, thank you. So I put this on the agenda, not because it directly relates to our discussion today, but because whenever I attend the CJC, the question always comes up. So I thought it'd be worthwhile, this SDP subgroup, knowing the latest. So in terms of the marine guidance, marine guidance is perhaps the wrong word. What we've had is a marine data set that runs to approximately 800 pages. So I can't answer questions on the individual detail of specific SACs, I'm afraid. I'm still working my way through it. But I wanted to give you the headlines, as it were. So the NRW released this guidance on the 25th of June, I believe, and that information contains all the information about whether a species or a typology of whatever makes a SAC special, the features, if you like, and whether or not they were in favourable or unfavourable condition, and what the confidence in that data was, low, high, medium confidence. So they've released that for all the SACs that are self-contained within Wales. Any SACs that are adjoining other areas, such as England, or adjoining other regions, have been not assessed, and there is about approximately 5 years, they say, before those assessments will be undertaken. That's quite important for Powys, because obviously that encompasses the Severn and the whole region down the south of the coast, and obviously Banau Brycheiniog, less so for Ceredigion. But in terms of Ceredigion, it affects the West Wales Marine SAC, which has not been assessed because that's cross-boundary SAC. So the letter that was released with the information had the headline "Business as usual." This is somewhat misleading, really, depending on where you are in Wales. Now, fortunately for our region here today, Banau Brycheiniog, Ceredigion and Powys, I believe that the information provided so far doesn't have any direct impact on our SDP at this time, because what they've effectively said is any of the features that are in unfavourable status within the Cardigan Bay Marine SAC, they have low confidence in the data. And what they've done effectively is RAG status the impact of nitrates on various features, and then given a confidence level as to how confident in that data they are. Now, the confidence level for the ones that are failing in our SAC is low. So they have suggested then that a nutrient neutral approach is not required at this time, because we've been ragged amber, effectively. However, Pembrokeshire, large proportion of Pembrokeshire, large proportion of Carmarthenshire and a small proportion of Anglesey have been effectively ragged red. And what that means is that the nitrates they have medium or high confidence in the fact that nitrates are having an unfavourable impact on those features of the marine sac, which could be animals or habitat or other things. So there is some concern over this approach. I understand the pragmatism of the approach and the reason that this has been done in order to avoid a sort of collapse of development across Wales and a nutrient neutral approach required everywhere, which is, as we understand from the phosphate, very difficult to do. But the HRA, the HABS regs, doesn't allow for this sort of RAG status. It says that if there's an impact pathway on a feature, then that should be assessed. And so there is some concern at a PEDU, that's the Planning Environment Decisions Wales, particularly Pembrokeshire and Carmarthenshire, and at Welsh Government level, that this could be a decision that could come back to judicial reviewers or other further legal challenge. So there is some concern and there are various ongoing meetings around it. We've determined in Ceredigion that we will HRA any development that we consider could have an impact pathway, even though we've been described as business as usual. But we are not implementing a nutrient neutrality approach at this time until guidance changes. The issue with the information they've provided so far is that the maps are very vague, and we know that dissolved inorganic nitrogen moves quite quickly in water bodies. So we don't understand where it's coming from and the impact it's having and how quickly it moves on. So they have agreed to provide that sort of data that they had in the next month or so. But they've decided it would take between 9 months and 18 months before they're able to provide planning guidance as to what this means for those affected catchments. So that's quite a long time to wait without any guidance, and it means that there's a significant number of applications in Pembrokeshire and Carmarthenshire, particularly in abeyance at the moment or on hold until we can move forward. It's not impacting Ceredigion at this time, but we are concerned about the potential for legal challenge given we have some species that are considered in unfavourable condition. So I think that's fair as an update. In terms of the wider impacts for Powys, or the whole region really, they did show us some imagery maps basically of where would be impacted or where they likely thought it would be impacted as and when they're able to assess those cross-boundary sacs. And it did cover the entirety of our region. So we don't know how that will play out, but it is something to be mindful of going forward as a potential risk to any future plan and any future SDP. So that's the update really. Have you got any questions for me on that?
Well, the only question I had was obviously what you said there at the last bit, the impact on any future development plans we have, you know. Yeah, because it would impact on that, just like why we're on hold with our phosphates. Although we are sort of fully aware what the situation is, and we're quite lucky in the Tyvee side, we know what the cause is with Welsh water treatments being the highest percentage. And I fully understand Pembrokeshire's it's got much bigger challenges, and now with this marine sac on top of it, really quite challenging times for Pembrokeshire, I've got to say. Are there any questions from Daniel?
Yeah, just confirm. I guess we probably know the answer, but in terms of the sources, is it linked to a specific industry, Sarah?
Yeah.
Is it agriculture, presuming, or?
Yeah, so the Dual Cymru have agreed that they'll work with NRW to do SAGES modelling, which is effectively what we know what causes the phosphates, but they'll do that for dissolved inorganic nitrogen in the coming months. But at the moment, NRW estimate that 90% of nitrogen is as a result of agriculture.
Yeah. Any other questions then? No. So
It might be worth adding, if you don't mind, that we know from our nutrient management plans in the Tyvee, the Cleddau and the Towie that even if all the co-op measures were put in place and were secured and investigated regularly to ensure they remained, that would not resolve the actual nutrient issue. So what that means in practice is that if we are going to resolve the nitrogen issue, the nitrates issue in the marine sacs and the rivers, then it takes more than the current legislation is available for. And that means that it would need a national approach from Welsh Government as well as regional approaches from nutrient management boards. So there's a lot of work to do in this area. And if we did get a legal challenge to the sort of way in which NRW have managed this issue, that would have strong implications for Ceredigion, hence why we're still reviewing the data.
And that would take years.
Absolutely.
Absolutely years. Adrian.
Yes, really just following on from what Sarah's just said, but there is a risk that any development that comes forward in any of these catchments which feed into a marine sac, so that would cover the Severn Estuary as well, potentially because the data hasn't been provided and we've got the HRA we have to deal with, we are potentially looking at a planning by challenge almost. So, potentially without an HRA on every single development, which could impact down a marine sac, whether work has been done or not, potentially lays us open down the line. And, this is a concern without that NRW guidance, which is unlikely to be forthcoming anytime soon, as Sarah said. So there is a risk to all developments which potentially impact up downstream into marine sac.
And does this impact on any plans? If we're going to start looking at LDP, STP, what kind of impact could that be? In basic terms, really.
So Carmarthenshire have just, in the autumn, finished their examination of their plan, and we're awaiting the sort of inspector's decision and any further amendments that were required. They may now be in a situation of having to go back to examination stage with further evidence to demonstrate how they will manage the nitrates. Pembrokeshire were about to submit their plan for consideration. They will now have to think long and hard as to whether it's worth doing that at this stage. For Ceredigion, I would say it's too risky at this time to start plan preparation for us without knowing more about what the potential legal challenge is on the way in which this data has been issued. Hence why we're sort of keeping an open mind at this time. I'm not sure that in reality it is an immediate risk for Powys or for Banau Brycheiniog, but it is something that they need to have on their radar. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. Councillor Jacob Raymond.
I suppose in relation to the marine sacs, no, but with the river sacs that we already have on the Y and the Usk and the methodologies there, if we're now looking at nitrates at a 90% contribution from agriculture, added to the 75% for phosphates in the report that was published a few years ago, we know that the development that we would be proposing now is tied in with Welsh Water improvements, tied into the funding stream, etc. But what we're not seeing is the subsequent sustainable farming initiatives. So we're dealing with 90 and 70%, and actually the contribution of the new development that we might have lined up in our development plans is a relatively modest component against all existing development. If you're thinking it's 90%, all existing development is 10% of that total. And so these are very marginal things, and yet the development itself is a huge driver for sustaining our communities. So Sarah, I know that we're talking about marine, but if you take our SAC environment across the board, it's potentially very big impacts, isn't it?
It depends, because each SAC catchment is so different. So, for example, the Tyvi, it's 68% comes from Dŵr Cymru wastewater treatment plants outflows. So we can say that from a phosphate perspective, new development would have a significant impact. But when we're looking at nitrates, but caveat that with, we haven't actually got the SAGES modelling yet, this is a percentage given by NRW, then, it would be useful to make that argument. But the habitats regulations doesn't define it in that context. It defines any impact as negative. So because we can clarify more clearly through our calculator the impact development has versus a field, for example, and the way it's managed, we're feeling the brunt of it, but that's not always fair. I think in recognition of that, Welsh Government will shortly be publishing, although heads of planning have had the information. The guidance on affordable housing and how to progress that regardless of the nutrient neutrality situation, because they're recognizing at a national level that affordable housing is such a significant priority. And when you put it in the terms that you just did, such a small percentage of the issue for many river catchments, that there should be ways to get through that legislation. So they've produced this DTA ecology guidance about IROPI, which is, I forget exactly what that means, but essentially overriding public priority development, which they're arguing affordable housing is. So they're trying to open pathways in river catchments or even marine catchments to allow for things. But the HABS regs legislation is not written to define which is the worst one, although it does say the fair share principle applies. Up to now, it doesn't feel like anything other than planning has necessarily been hit by that fair share principle, really. And I do think that's a conversation for Welsh Government to take forward. But in an election year, as is coming, there's probably less, there's probably some concern around that, given how influential and how important agriculture is to the national narrative.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that, Jake, for that question, and thanks, Sarah, for the answer. Any other questions relating to this agenda item? No, I'm certainly clearer on that, and I'm just a bit concerned about, the lack of sort of advice and guidance in the direction in the medium term, even. Gareth.
Diolch. Do we have translation, did you say?
Ydy, mae 'da ni.
So, dim ond cwestiwn cyflym, de, a sa'n mwyn fe'n addas i'r pwynt ma'n y bidion. O ran y nitrate yn enwedig, os yna unrhyw wybodaeth neu mesuriadau newydd i gael nawr de i gymaru y blwyddyn hanner o gymeddwl bod blwyddyn o'r NDZs wedi bod mewn nawr. Os oes ni'n siarad am ti bod amaeth yw'r ffactor fwyaf yna yn yr elfen hynny, gyda'r camau newydd o fod malifiat o hynny, dyle newid gosydyn fod. Os yna unrhyw modeli neu ffigurau newydd i gael eleni gymaru llynedd?
Are there any new data sets, any comparative data sets?
Not that I'm aware of, to be honest with you. The release of the data from NRW, I'll just share a quick page with you to give you a flavour for what this looks like. Let me know when you can see that.
Yeah, I can see that.
So here it sets out the species, and then it sets out the indicative assessment, the key evidence used, and the level of agreement effectively. So, and then it goes into a bit more information about the particular species it's referring to. So in this, it's the bottlenose dolphin, for example. So this is what you have for each of the features of the SAC, and they're split out by SAC across Wales. But the MVZ data isn't a feature of this. So it may be that there is some information there. I haven't personally seen it, but I will check with our program manager, Gail, who's more on top of current releases than I am. But I know that we were at a meeting just Friday, with PEDU and Welsh Government specifically on this issue. And she made the statement there that even with full compliance of all of the new required regs under co-op, it still wouldn't reduce the impact enough to reduce the nitrates in the river or the marine areas. So whether we have data that demonstrates that's measured the performance or progress over the last year, I'm not 100% sure. I suspect we don't is the answer. But I will check with Gail.
And to be fair, isn't a whole year effect yet, so technically it might be in the next year that it might come out, but it'd be worth, if it doesn't come automatically, it would possibly well be worth chasing it to see that there are measurements being taken.
It might be worth just saying as well that we have secured shared prosperity funding in Ceredigion to install nitrate monitors in our marine SAC. So we plan to install 4 across the Cardigan Bay SAC. And then we will be in a position to internally monitor the changes over time. Now, obviously, in hindsight, these perhaps would have been better installed in Pembrokeshire, as have recently learned, but that's the way the nature of these things go. It will give us the data and we can share that information and see what as we implement measures going forward, has made the biggest impact, or where we think particular sources of nitrates are coming from, if we can measure source points that we think that we're currently investigating could be an issue. So that's what we'll be using the monitors for.
Okay. And Angela, I can see that you put something in chat, but go ahead, speak.
Yeah. Basically just wanted to declare out loud that I am a farmer, so while we're discussing farming issues, but I'm a non-extensive, nature-friendly farmer. But I think just make that point.
No problem, Angela, and I know Gareth is going to say the same. So Gareth,
Yeah.
you're a farmer as well, and I'm a farmer's son. So,
And
the nature of being rural Wales.
Yeah, if I can just come back as well, I don't want it to seem that we've taken, as a nutrient management board or as an authority, we're taking a sort of dim view on farming. No. In fact, it's quite the opposite, really. We recognise the importance of farming to our communities and to our economy. And so as an authority and as a nutrient management board, we try to be as proactive as we can to say, farmers need to earn a living and they need to farm their land. Let's just find a way to do it that also doesn't harm the river as much, preferably. And that's the sort of approach. So we've got quite a lot of farmers on our stakeholder groups. We always welcome more, though. So if anyone's interested.
Yes, and we've had projects that involve farmers as well, and they were quite welcome with some of the advice given, the repairing fencing on the catchment, etc. So yeah. So no, fair enough, and hopefully there'll be some kind of news or some more information next week at the Royal Welsh, but who knows. I know that the Deputy First Minister's down on Tuesday with the sustainable farming stuff that's going on, the changes are there, and the First Minister I know is there on Monday morning as well, so we'll see what happens with what Welsh Government have to say in the context of the agricultural industry. Any other questions on this item then? No. Okay, only Simimlan. We'll move on then to the next item, which is reshaping strategic planning in Mid Wales, and there's a paper on this that was attached as well. So assume this is you again, Sarah, or is it someone else?
Yeah, sorry, it's me again.
Okay.
So this paper was originally started by Peter Morris from Powys, where he had, I guess, been tasked with or was thinking about ways in which we could achieve the same ambitions of an SDP, but perhaps with less cost or resources involved. So he had started working on this paper towards the end of last year and the start of this year. And he'd met with Gareth in Banau Brycheiniog and myself and had a discussion over what we thought of it, if you like. Obviously, Pete's off at the moment. So I was asked if I could complete the paper, if you like, and present the options. It's not specifically I wouldn't say it's specifically a Ceredigion project that we thought we would progress, but I think it's worth having the conversation because Peter spent a lot of time considering what the options were across Mid Wales, and this paper sort of outlines that. So I don't intend to read it word for word. You've all had the papers, but I just want to give you a flavour of it, if that's okay. So essentially, the paper outlines what the existing development plan system is in Mid Wales and considers whether there's any feasible alternative to a formal strategic development plan, and if we should pursue this in respect of Mid Wales. So as I'm sure everyone's aware, the overarching plan for our area is the NDF, or Future Wales, the National Plan. And any plans and policies that we develop in an SDP context or an LDP or an LDP Light have to be in compliance with Future Wales. Equally, LDP Lights need to be in compliance with an SDP. So there is a hierarchy of plans, if you like. So the CJCs, corporate joint committees, were established and were given 3 main responsibilities: 1 regional planning, 2 regional transport, and 3 regional economic planning. So in the establishment of those CJCs, strategic planning and the development of a strategic development plan was a requirement of their establishment. So if we were to move to a position where we consider other options, that's not in accordance with what's set out at the current time in our kind of mandate of what we are to do. So much further discussion would be required. So this is a starting point. I think it's important to set that out. When developing an SDP, effectively it mirrors the LDP preparation process. To date, Welsh Government have published a draft manual for SDPs, and that really is a carbon copy of the LDP manual to much degree, with some small tweaks. So what that means is as you'll be familiar with the LDPs from your own areas, we can often see them as quite cumbersome documents and quite difficult in terms of the evidence-based requirements that are on the team to be able to promote certain policies and to take that through examination. That's multiplied at an SDP level, because obviously we've got to do the exact same amount of work, if not slightly more, but across the whole region. So SDPs in and of themselves under the current manual and the current regs are not simple documents. There's been no opportunity to kind of regionalize those, because we might have decided that in Mid Wales we could do this and that, but not some of the things. That's not an option at the moment. It is a requirement that we do all of it. To date, excuse me, none of the 4 CJCs in Wales has agreed to commence SDP preparation, primarily as a consequence of insufficient resources, both staff capacity and finance. So we know that SDPs are costly. We've estimated in a budget that excludes staffing other than a core staff of 1 manager and 1 GIS officer for an SDP, that the cost of delivering it would be approximately £2.8 million. Now, we did that work last year, so we haven't factored in inflation into that. I've recently seen evidence from other regions, specifically the North region, that's looking at, they estimate the cost to be 3.6 million, but I haven't got the detail of what they've taken into account in that costings as to whether the staffing has been taken account. But what I think is important to note is they're expensive documents to do, and they're resource intensive. And obviously other regions have got multiple regions to share that cost burden across, whereas we've obviously only got Powys and Ceredigion as core partners, and then Banau Brycheiniog make a reduced contribution. It's also important to note that Banau Brycheiniog are part of multiple SDP regions, so they've got a commitment across the region, and that's a significant barrier for them. So the costs of SDPs, are required for evidence, impact assessments. We'd need a joint ICT system, consultation, and the examination in public costs, as well as the obvious resources from a staffing point of view. We have a planning resource issue across Wales, but especially in our region as well. There's insufficient trained planners to do the jobs that we have available, and this is a drain across. So often we're poaching staff from other authorities in effect, and then we're creating a drain elsewhere. At the moment, we don't have a policy manager in Ceredigion. I don't think there's a policy manager in Banau Brycheiniog at the moment. They're advertising. I don't know what the results of that is. And obviously we've got Peter off in Powys. So there is a resource issue regionally. In terms of an SDP, once we had undertaken it, we estimate it'd take about 6 years to do. You would then do local development plan lights, and they take approximately 2 to 3 years to undertake. And what they're missing from a full LDP is the strategic policies have been set by your SDP. So you're more looking at allocated sites in your individual authorities and any locally specific policies. So from a total time point of view, we're looking at least 8 to 9 years before we would have full plan coverage with an SDP and LDP lights. So we've given the update on where we are with our LDPs at the start. So I'm not going to go through those pages of the document, which is pages 2 and 3. I'll just give you a little bit about where we are. So our SDP subgroup was set up in around 2023. Since then, we've held about 5 or 6 meetings, and we've agreed regionally that we would dedicate a resource to the SDP, which is effectively one officer 1 day a week. And that person has been shared across the team as and when resources are allowed, or the specific work we've been looking at. It sometimes includes me. It sometimes includes Catherine and Connor. And what we've effectively done is drafted a very draft delivery agreement, produced a budget, created a list of skill sets across the region, and a list of the work streams that we could pick out from the manual and from the regs that would need doing in each of the different topic areas or the different elements that make up an SDP. So a resource list, if you like. Those have been shared at the SDP subgroup previously, and they've been party to discussions at an SDP officer working group, which in recent months has not met as often as we would like, and that's something we want to pick up going forward. So that work has been undertaken, but really before we can progress an SDP, we would need to agree a budget, and we would need to establish whether that was going to be a separate team or whether we were going to share resources across the region, bearing in mind what I've earlier said about resource capacity and the ability to appoint planners. So there were some concerns really in the past about diverting limited staff resources away from the ongoing replacement LDP in Powys and the newly expected replacement LDP in Bala to an SDP, because you would fail then on up-to-date plan coverage, particularly for Powys who have a drop-dead date. So in the document, you'll see that Peter Morris started out by setting out what Welsh Government had outlined in terms of strategic planning. And in 2015, when this discussion started, really, they did outline that we weren't necessarily an area that was identified as potential for an SDP, because they were looking at places where housing markets and travel to work areas cross authority boundaries to resolve issues that have implications beyond individual LDPs, where there were larger than local issues such as housing demand, search areas for strategic employment sites and supporting transport, which cut across a number of local planning authority boundaries. And it provisionally identified 3 areas for strategic planning: Cardiff, Swansea and the A55 corridor, because they advised that there were significant cross-boundary strategic issues. Now, when the guidance and the CJC regs came out, we were obviously identified as a CJC region with the requirement to undertake strategic planning, economic planning and transport planning. And at that time, we set up the subgroup and have held the meetings, but we haven't necessarily progressed, partly because of resources, but also because we don't have the full manual, and Welsh Government have confirmed that that's not likely to be published until 2026. And because there were issues around VAT and other issues in the past, but those seem to have been resolved. So that's where we are really and what we've identified or progressed. But it's important to note that the subgroup or members of the subgroup don't dispute that there are benefits to regional working, even in the context here, which weren't necessarily outlined by Welsh Government in 2015. We can collaborate in terms of resources, expertise, sharing evidence, examination costs, closer alignment of policies, SPGs. There's no point reinventing the wheel. If somebody's got a good one, we should all be adopting that. Shared rural vision, and, you know, looking at regional skills hub, again, this is a positive way to share resources. The question I suppose I'm posing to you today that Pete started when he began this paper is the SDP required to realise these ambitions, or is there an alternative? So in his paper, he has set out a number of options, really. I should have said he's also outlined a risk again that was mentioned earlier, which is the new national park and the potential for that to come in the coming months or years, and how that might affect an SDP if we began preparation now. We'd need to be mindful of where that's progressing, because obviously it encompasses parts of Powys, so they would be expected to be a partner on the CJC, on the SDP in the CJC. So the conclusion being that the case for an SDP in Mid Wales was relatively weak, and it remains so. Nothing has vastly changed in that time. However, there are benefits to regional collaboration. And so this option set out would be: 1, maintain LDP preparation only, which is obviously Bala Brycheiniog and Powys, and Ceredigion need to decide what they plan to do regarding their LDP. And then work with Future Wales as the overarching plan for this area, which we would have to do to be in compliance with an SDP anyway. This in the table on page 9 is option 1. And effectively, it's suggesting that Future Wales is sufficient with our LDPs, that an SDP is not necessarily required in this region to lay out strategic issues. The LDPs have varying costs across authorities, estimated at approximately 1.2 million, and this would be equivalent to an SDP preparation without an LDP light. The timescales are 4 to 5 years. It sometimes can take longer. It really depends on the evidence base and the factors that are affecting particular or individual local authorities. In terms of risks, LDPs are quite well versed now across Wales. There's been many of them done. We can learn from those mistakes and we can amend ours. Each of us have already got one, so we have been through the process once. And they provide they provide LPAs with the most autonomy, if you like, and certainty of delivery, because the LPA, the local authority, is doing it for themselves, as it were. So that sort of joint working risk is lessened. But then there are other risks in terms of being able to resource your LDP and manage with staff recruitment issues, etc. In terms of the overall summary then, it's the lowest cost option, it's the shortest timescale to achieve development plan coverage across the region, and the most autonomy retained by local planning authorities. A suggestion then around option 2 was to maintain LDP preparation, but with an agreed regional planning guideline. And there could be a different name for that, but that's what I've sort of termed it, a collaboration agreement, if you like. So with Future Wales and our collaboration agreement and our LDPs, we would be very broadly covered in terms of policy and agreeing some kind of regional principles around strategic development issues. The cost is likely to be the same as delivering an LDP, and it depends really on how involved we made that regional collaboration agreement. It would only really be possible if we aligned our timescales, so we had the time and space to do this and to get that in place in order to then progress our LDPs. Obviously, we need to be mindful that Powys have got the most pressing urgency around that. But I would just reiterate that this is not in accordance with our statutory function that the CJC has in order to prepare a strategic development plan. And I'm thankful to Chris O'Brien in Banai, who sent me some information previously and had been involved previously in a similar sort of working exercise in the Southwest, where they had been trying to organise themselves to agree a set of principles and found that this had floundered. And because they're not a statutory document, your compliance with it is based on your willingness to do so. There's nothing forcing you to comply. So we could spend quite a lot of time and then we could find that one or more authorities go off and do their own thing, as it were, which would be a wasted effort. I'd like to think that that wouldn't be the case in our region because we have similar problems, similar issues, but you never know. So the suggested time frame for this is 4 to 5 years. However, LDP preparation could take longer to work collaboratively on regional planning guidance unless a dedicated resource could be dedicated to this work. So it could be quicker if we can agree a resource in order to put someone on that to purposely do that work who isn't got other priorities. So risk factors, well, I've outlined it's not a statutory approach, so we would need significant discussion with Welsh Government to agree that this might be a palatable option for our region. It would give local authorities some autonomy and they would still be able to develop their LDPs without the significant financial contribution that would be required for an SDP. But it does require commitment from all three parties to make this work and for that to be a document that we agree we take forward and use those principles for our individual LDPs and our individual planning decision making. In terms of cost, similar costs to the LDP option, really. The cost would be the amount of resources we put into agreeing that and the meetings, etc. And in terms of timeframes, again, not necessarily a great issue in terms of timeframes, but we would need a resource commitment. So I guess it wasn't an option, but our existing approach is that we are undertaking our LDPs where we are and we're considering our commencement of the SDP. We've been considering that for a fair amount of time now without further progress or commitment to a resource. We don't really have any significant strategic cross-border planning issues. That was recognised by Welsh Government and is still recognised now in conversation with them. The estimated cost of an SDP is 2.8 million, excluding staff. That's quite a significant cost for Powys and Ceredigion as the two main contributors, but also significant for Banai. And then there would be the additional cost of the LDP lights following an SDP adoption. So it takes 6 years approximately to undertake an SDP, but 9 years before you got to full plan coverage with LDP lights. Timelines could obviously be longer for Banai Brycheiniog because they are invested in several SDP regions, and I believe that you have to have got those SDPs adopted before you can do your LDP light, so they might be caught by that issue in terms of time frame as well. SDP preparation as a risk is untested, so we would be the first or alongside the first. We can't learn from others' mistakes, but there is a risk of lack of consensus between the authorities which could delay or prevent the adoption of the SDP. It is obviously the longest, most expensive option and the longest timescale, but it is our statutory duty to undertake, and we should be mindful of that. So that's enough from me on that report. In conclusion, regional planning, there's no quick wins, are there? And there are risks approached with all approaches, risks associated, sorry. But we have spent 3 years debating whether we should begin an SDP or not. So I do feel that we need to move forward. This is a potential option we can move forward with, or we can, move forward with SDPs. That's more tricky because we don't have the manual at this time, but it's something to bear in mind. I do think, I might be the only planner in the room who thinks this, I don't know. I do think LDPs are cumbersome, burdensome, and not 100% effective for their regions. And I worry that we could create an SDP document which would be similar, but more costly. But I also believe that regional planning and taking a collaborative regional approach would be beneficial for our region, and that we would be in a position as a wholly rural region to articulate a rural vision that doesn't exist in the other SDP regions. So there are benefits to it, sharing resources and all the rest of it, but it is costly, it is expensive, and we do have a resource issue. So I made a few recommendations on this that I'd like you to discuss and consider. I'm not sure we can actually make one of those without a councillor from Banau Brycheiniog, but it's worth a discussion. And those were for us to discuss the alternative options to SDP preparation with Welsh Government, including removal of the statutory duty for the Mid Wales CJC to prepare an SDP. Number 2, to discuss with Welsh Government any plans to remove end dates to LDPs to support greater flexibility. I have had that discussion and I can update you on that in a second. And to discuss with Welsh Government whether they formally intend to amend review periods for LDPs beyond 4 years and work back from the end date of the plan instead of the adoption date. So by coincidence, items 2 and 3, I already had some information on, and that was that there'd been a lot of discussion around this in the recent Welsh Government consultation on planning resilience, with many authorities setting out a position for or against, and there was quite a conflicting view. Obviously, agents and architects and developers were pushing for shorter periods. They wanted faster, quicker LDPs, not longer review periods. So there was a conflict from a sort of planning professionals, not within local planning authorities. So they have reviewed it and decided that actually where the position they're in at the moment with the 4 years was probably the most palatable. There was no consensus across the board. However, they do recognise that drop dead dates are causing a problem. And so they, depending on the election and what gets in next year, they're considering changes to primary legislation to amend drop dead dates as of the 2015 Planning Act, but nothing will occur before then. But in terms of review periods, there's no expectation or intention to amend the review periods at this time. That's it from me on that paper.
Well done, Sarah. Thank you for taking us through it. Excellent. Well, I didn't realise that the memorandum didn't identify us as an area of strategic planning. I didn't know until I read that paper, and that the focus is in the southeast. I'm also supported some kind of regional working of some kind, and we do need to move forward in somehow. We have been discussing it for a while. Councillor Jake, then coming in.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. It's a marathon, isn't it? It isn't a sprint for us here, but or perhaps it's a steeplechase, because there are a number of hurdles, hedges, and water jumps for us to deal with here. It isn't straightforward. It's not necessarily of our making or asking, in the sense that we had gone back to the minister about the drop dead date at least twice and been rebutted. So thank you for carrying on with that. Perhaps I should say picking up the baton on that, since we're talking about sort of events. But it's quite difficult, isn't it? Because the minister could do that now if they wished. They have recognised that the Senedd elections next year are clearly a point of some change going forward, and I think we need to recognise that in any representations we're making. And in terms of the WLGA and the Rural Manifesto that we have already indicated and are indicating strongly, we think there needs to be a review and a simplification of planning from the top down. And I do wonder whether Future Wales itself, 2040, the national planning document, which I had open on my screen, I've got it here on my screen at the moment. If you turn to page 126 there's a whole chapter, of course, about what Mid Wales looks like and what strategic planning's like in Mid Wales. And I do wonder whether they're setting us homework that effectively has already been done in terms of that strategic output, that oversight for our area in the context of the level of change that we anticipate. And, you know, I do like the recommendation about pushing back and asking, because I think there is an opportunity here with a new government to review of Future Wales, actually for the strategic work for us to be done through that process. So actually it might not be done by us, it could be done. It's not one of your options, I know. But we have, you know, we're now 3 years later on than when we started this conversation, and only now months away from a Senedd election and a change which I think will bring some inevitable difference to the landscape going forward. So I think we have to ask that. So there are a series of issues and changes here, and the other one, frankly, is the national park. And I don't think that we should underestimate this. I've had meetings with Natural Resources Wales more recently, where they've come back trying to broker a deal for you know, a lesser proposal than the one that has been consulted on, if we withdraw our objections. And we're not proposing to withdraw our objections as a council, and in which case, you know, you can see that one of the things they hadn't factored in, it will trigger an automatic review of our LDP. It also would trigger a review of any work that we're doing on an SDP, because it would bring another player in. Just you know, we've got Banai in the south, and we'd have a new national planning body potentially in the north, and so we are sort of frozen. And I think it's quite legitimate for us to just say, hang on, we are keeping our finger on the pause button here, because you have created so much uncertainty for us around our CJC and our local planning authority responsibilities. So notwithstanding the will that we have to collaborate either on a joint LDP, if that's what we chose to do, or a joint SDP, if that's what we chose to do, or on separate LDPs, you know, with an umbrella statement. So I don't think we can be reasonably criticised when there is so much uncertainty caused by that. Now, if we were to get a new national park without planning responsibilities, a new national landscape, an extended national landscape, for instance, or another type of solution, that would take away that trigger. But I'm sure Adrian, who's in the top corner of my screen here, would still want to dash to the finish line in this race to get the LDP adopted here in Powys, because, you know, when you're 3 years into something, you want to get it across the line. I think we would have paused and done something else 2 or 3 years ago. I think now we have to try and finish this, and then we'd be in a position to quietly reflect and do some more joint work, which I think we're really up for, Sarah and Chris on my screen here, whatever form that takes. But for me, we've got to keep it simple. We've got to recognise the politics. I think is going to change in 2026, and I think that gives us an opportunity to be very firmly saying we think there needs to be a different approach to CJC responsibilities here. I think that's where the light approach actually can be done. We can either do that light approach, or frankly it could be done through a review of the 2040 national plan. So I'm for your recommendations. I think we do push back. in a positive discursive way, but I think we add that other factor that I've just raised around the national plan into our thinking. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Several good points there. Thanks to Jake for that. Chris.
Yeah, thanks. It's just more of a kind of matter of kind of governance around this working group. To me, there's no kind of, I want to understand the nature of these recommendations. So there's no name to the report. I want to understand, has the report been through the scrutiny of the kind of monitoring officer of the CJC? Has it been through the consideration of the senior management of the CJC? And are there any to-date audit and scrutiny recommendations into the way that the CJC is fulfilling its statutory planning functions, which would help us understand the recommendations? I just want to understand, obviously the report's been shared in advance, but is this being driven by the senior management of the CJC and giving this officer advice to this working group? Or is it a half prepared paper by Peter with his Powys hat on or his CJC hat on? And then just to come back to around the Senedd elections in 2026, I think it's pertinent to understand that we're involved in South East Wales CJC. I think it's very soon, the 28th of July, there's a meeting there to kind of consider submitting their delivery agreement to the Welsh Government and moving on that and committing the 5-year budget towards it. Already this year, they've committed £498,000 to doing it. They've employed a head of strategic development planning there, and from all intents and purposes, they're fully going towards preparing a strategic development plan. So much like the mid want to be stepping back, certainly Southeast Wales are stepping forward with a pace, as are North Wales, who are taking a draft delivery agreement on the 18th in a couple of days for consideration. And both, because of that positive action, stand to benefit from an additional £200,000 worth of funding towards preparing a strategic development plan. So in the context of stepping back, we should probably understand, both in the North and South East Wales, of the momentum behind these. And there's elements in the paper which kind of forget the extent of lobbying which went on to ensure that Mid Wales had a strategic development plan as well. And it's remiss not to identify the level of lobbying when we were within a region where it was called Southwest and Mid Wales. We collectively attended the Senedd inquiry asking for a separate Mid Wales region, and then we got what we wanted. So yeah, it's kind of, I don't know, it's just around that. I just want to understand how the advice given from officers of the CJC is kind of going through that senior management and governance kind of sign off, to ensure that they're happy with it, as much as coming from perhaps local officers in each of the local authorities. Are the chief exec cited and aware and fully signed up to these recommendations, is, I guess, my question. But sorry, a bit of a ramble there, but yeah, just to present the other side of things a bit.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah. So as I understand it, it's the role of the SDP subgroup to discuss and debate the issues and then present back to the CJC our thoughts or recommendations. So in regards to this paper, I can't honestly say who requested that Pete consider these options or prepare a paper. I can only inform you that I was asked to take it on after he was poorly and to finish off the paper and present it to the SDP subgroup. And if some of those recommendations were considered palatable by the subgroup or wanted to be progressed or pursued, then I would be tasked with then taking that to the CJC board to ask whether they wanted me to do that. So we would be making a recommendation upwards rather than having had any particular discussion downwards about what the recommendation should be. Hence why really I've stated at least twice that it is our statutory function of the CJC. I say it's the CJC statutory function to prepare a strategic development plan. And if they decide, if the SDP subgroup recommended they didn't do that in favour of a regional collaboration agreement, they would need to be comfortable with that decision at a CJC level, that they progress that in spite of what the regs say they should do. But I don't know what the answer would be.
Okay, thanks. Adrian.
Yes, I mean, sort of building on some of these concerns already mentioned, I think my concern would be what would be the status of any regional collaboration document. It won't have been through any formal examination as such. It's not like it's going to go through an LDP process. It won't have been through the SDP process. If we agree a set of regional guidelines, and as we're out in front at the moment, and we accept them, we put them through examination, and our plan is adopted with those regional guidelines in place. But then potentially issues emerge, where Ceredigion isn't comfortable with the regional guidelines, perhaps 2 years down the line when they're developing their plan, or Banai similarly. Where does that leave the process? We've got regional guidelines which one authority may have adopted as part of its LDP process, but then, as additional evidence has emerged, we're potentially in a situation where those regional guidelines don't hold up. What is the impact upon the adopted Powys plan, for argument's sake, if then the other authorities go off on a slightly different tangent? So it's this uncertainty as to what those regional guidelines actually are. We talk about regional guidelines or regional procedures. What level are we going to set them at? Is it simply going to be, well, let's collaborate and gather evidence? We can gather evidence regionally. We do a certain amount of that already. For instance, we've undertaken the stage 1 strategic flood consequences assessment as a regional piece of evidence gathering. If it's solely at that level, that may be acceptable because you're then taking that evidence and running it through your own LDP examination. If you're trying to create regional guidelines which are laying down policy, what is the mechanism to have that examined? And I am unclear where that bar is going to sit with regards to these regional guidelines, whatever they may be. And I think we do need some clarity as to the direction of travel there.
Yeah. Is that what's in that first recommendation, to actually discuss that alternative and get more detail out of that? I think, Sarah, you mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, I think to answer Adrian's question is that's all to be determined really, and that would be the discussion if there were an appetite for a regional collaboration agreement, that we would need to be quite clear in setting out what that looked like, or have those discussions. Maybe the different authorities have different views. Personally, I would like to see a situation in which we agree a sort of set of methodologies as to how we might apportion growth, or how we might look at landscape impacts and that sort of thing, learn from the experts in the room. So we've got, Banai Brycheiniog far more up on the sort of landscape green issues than Ceredigion are, but we can give you quite a lot of advice around Welsh language and now seemingly wind turbines. So is it possible that we can share that experience and that expertise across the region and say, right, these are our shared set of the ways in which we'll procure, and we'll try and agree sort of regional procedures around, like we did with the SFCA, and then each authority look at it. But that's just a view. I haven't set that out, nor am I advocating it that that's how we'd go forward. I think if we did agree that there's some merit in a regional collaboration, those are the kind of conversations we'd need to have as to what does that look like and how can we best use that. In terms of an examination, I think the point of doing this rather than an SDP, from what I can ascertain of what Pete set out, is to avoid those sorts of costs and difficulties. But as Chris earlier, when he saw the drafts, sent me, this has been tried before and it hasn't worked elsewhere. So there's no guarantee. It would be based on the promise that we're working together for the greater good, and it would need to be useful for us to do it. There are examples of it working really well. We've got the Nutrient Management Board across Pembrokeshire, Carmarthenshire, Ceredigion. That's an agreed set of regional principles, not examined, but we each have a plan and we follow those and we try and work together where we can. Even now, we're not directly affected in Ceredigion. We're supporting them with evidence, with staffing, resources. You know, we work as a team. So I can see it working, but I also recognise what status would it have as a document? How can we guarantee we align with it? These are very tricky questions. I don't have the answer, Adrian.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Chris.
Just real quickly, just to amplify what Adrian was saying, that it's not just for the 3 authorities involved, it's all the stakeholders as well. So all the different house builders, if it doesn't favour their outcome, they start picking it apart. So we've got to consider all the different stakeholders and their opportunity to engage with whatever non-statutory approach we were to take forward, and rely on their goodwill right through the process as well. So it's not just our goodwill between us, it's all the other stakeholder involved as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Gareth.
Thanks, Chair. I think the paper is really helpful to enable us to step back and consider some of these challenges and issues and resources around the SDP. So thank you, Sarah, and to Peter for preparing. I think there is a case for strategic planning in Mid Wales, and whether that's through the SDP or through a different mechanism to deliver. It will give us the opportunity to set our long-term vision. It will help align our plans with the regional transport plan, with the economic investment and growth plans for the region. And it's something that, as a region, I think we worked collaboratively over the last 10 plus years now. We made the clear case for Mid Wales, and I think this is an opportunity to really set that out. What is our spatial strategy? How does it align? So whether it is through an SDP or whether we can negotiate another route, I think that is one of the things that we've asked for as a region, and I think this document will help deliver our vision and ambitions. So I just wanted to kind of endorse the approach generally, because I think through the report it's kind of not drawing out some of the strengths of that regional collaborative approach that we've kind of been promoting, and the cohesive kind of regional planning that we've kind of been asking for in the past. Thanks.
Yeah. No, thanks, Gareth. Okay. Any other questions on this? Because we're not core, we can't make any decisions, but there are some recommendations at the end there, and you've answered 2 points already, Sarah.
Just on the point that Councillor Berryman made at the beginning about sort of review of future Wales and ongoing discussion.
Yeah.
I am aware that they are planning to start or going to start a review team for Future Wales, and they've asked whether or not a representative from the Planning Office Society Wales will attend, of which I'm vice chair. So I have already thrown my hat in the ring, as it were, to be on that group, because I'd had a similar thought really, that if we were going to have these conversations about, do we need an SDP, a full SDP, or is there some alternative mechanism, kind of SDP light or whatever the right term might be, then they need to be with Welsh Government. So I do think that's worth progressing, but it's a longer term conversation, because just like writing an LDP is several years away. But I'm happy to say that was already sort of on my radar, and something I was kind of saying that I'd be happy to do as a part of my general role, So just thought I'd add that.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sarah. So that's good. Any other points then? Because obviously we can't vote on any recommendations, but those recommendations are there. And you did say that you probably had conversations with regards 2 and 3 anyway, Sarah. So are there any points that anyone want to raise on this agenda item before I move forward then? Yep. Okay. We'll move on to agenda item 5, which is the forward plan for the SDP. So it's sort of married to this agenda item. So do you want to say anything on this point, Sarah?
Only that obviously we were sent a letter to say that it was very sorry that we hadn't achieved submitting a delivery agreement by last Christmas, and that they recognise resource issues and they were allocating a certain amount of funding to CJC regions, subject to them submitting a delivery agreement by this Christmas or the end of the year, effectively December 2025. Now, in reality, if we had a polished delivery agreement and we consulted on that today and then undertook the work on that consultation to amend it in accordance with whatever comments and feedback we got back, it would still be highly unlikely we could take it through the CJC timeframes and the scrutiny and all the rest of it in order to achieve that. But before I sort of unilaterally think to myself, okay, we're not going to achieve that time frame, I needed to ensure that you were mindful that was the case, and there isn't really any way of rushing it. I know Ban Ibrahim are doing theirs at the minute, and they know this takes time. You've got to draft it, you've got to get it right, and then you've got to consult on it for 6 weeks, and then you've got to amend it in accordance with that consultation. So really, I just wanted to manage expectations and get sort of broad agreement, though there's no formal recommendation from this SDP subgroup, that you are aware that we are unlikely to meet that. And as a result of that, we will not be able to achieve or access that particular funding pot this year, which I believe, as Chris mentioned before, other authorities are looking to achieve that 200,000 pot from Welsh Government. It's unlikely we could do that. So that's all I want to say on this point, really.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Jake.
Yeah, I don't want to be a dog with the bone, but I really don't know how we can sign off on a delivery agreement when we've got a new national park hanging over us, because we would simply have to rewrite that delivery agreement. So, I really think it's unreasonable to press us to progress a delivery agreement when a rewrite it would be triggered by a decision on a new national park. We understand that there'll be a consultation coming forward September, October time, and we'll be in a better place to understand that. But frankly, I think we just have to continue where we are with this. And the other thing, I regret to say that without the guidance, it becomes very difficult to finesse where we want to go either. So I'm not too worried, Sarah, that we're in the position we're in. I think it's a sensible position to occupy until we know more. And and it's not a position of our making in that sense, is it?
No, I agree with you, and I agree with you, Jake, in terms of where we are. With the position we're in at the moment. There are so many factors we've discussed over the last hour or so. So yeah, I totally agree. Any other points anyone wants to raise? No. Okay. So we on item 6 then, learning from other SDP. I know that Chris, you raised a few points. So what's any learning from the other SDP regions?
If I start with the Southwest, then I can give you a bit of an update of where they are, and I might rely on Chris or Gareth to say anything I've missed in terms of North and South, because they're obviously on those teams and I'm not. So in terms of the Southwest, there was very limited progress to date, predominantly because of lack of manual and resources and no dedicated SDP officer or team as such. More recently, in fact, just Friday, it was raised by Welsh Government at a meeting about the Marine SAC that because Carmarthenshire and Pembrokeshire are now so completely constrained, it just wouldn't be an appropriate time to progress any kind of delivery agreement around an SDP. So they're very much still on pause from any sort of progress, really, as a result previously of resources, but now probably Marine SAC has had a much greater impact than they anticipated it would. In terms of the North, they've appointed a very qualified officer to take over as SDP lead. And I believe that he has a draft delivery agreement. And like Chris said, he's taken that to the CJC board in the next few days or weeks. And I expect they will go out to consultation on that with a view to submitting that. They, as I understand it, have been able to access, in order to appoint that person, the additional funding from Welsh Government with the promise of the delivery agreement being very forthcoming, and their meetings with Welsh Government continue to progress in terms of the SDP. They seem keen to move it forward. In terms of the Southeast, as far as I'm aware, they are progressing probably further ahead than anyone else. They have consulted on delivery agreement. They've made amendments. They now have a chap from Bridgend, I believe it was, who has taken over as SDP regional lead. They haven't submitted their delivery agreement because they've still got some decisions to make around finance, I think, and resourcing, but they are working towards building an SDP team, and they're probably the most advanced region in that regard. That's as far as I'm aware. Is that a fair statement, Chris, Gareth?
Yeah. Okay.
I could just chip in a little bit. Thanks,
Sure.
Sarah. So we sit on the southwest and southeast. So southwest, as of a few weeks ago, this is before the marine sacks, but there was an agreement to proceed with the draft delivery agreement. So there had been a similar position to Mid Wales in terms of resourcing and the manual not being published being the reasons for not moving forward, but there was a decision to move forward with progressing the draft delivery agreement. That may have changed in light of the marine sacks, but that was the position. And then southeast, as you say, the only thing I would add there is the CJC has committed to building in the cost of the SDP in its medium-term financial plan. So as you said, it's ahead of the game in terms of looking at the resourcing as well.
Great, thanks, guys. Adrian.
Yes, I can just add a bit more about North Wales as well. As Sarah said, they've appointed an SDP team leader to take things forward. But the stage they're at the moment is looking at potentially those budgetary costs to create a dedicated SDP planning policy team for North Wales. So that work is currently ongoing alongside the DA. So that's the critical moment for them as well, I think.
Great. Thanks, Adrian, for that as well. Okay, any other questions or points anyone wants to raise on this agenda item? No? Oh, Sarah.
I just want to double check. So you're happy that I've got a verbal update to the CJC at the next meeting to give, because I didn't have time to write a paper between this one and the meeting being held. And so you're happy for me to report back that given the ambiguity around the national park and the manual and resource issues, we're not in a position to progress a draft delivery agreement at this time, but we keep it under review, and we are considering and we'll continue to consider options around regional and collaborative working, but we haven't made any formal decisions. Is that fair?
From my point of view, yes, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And I'm getting nods around. So yeah, if you can do that. Okay. I've got the final item on the agenda then, which is AOB. I've not had anything before the meeting. Are there any AOBs that anyone else wants to raise? No? Okay. Well, thanks for the update. Good discussion. A lot going on, quite complex as well. And just as for information behind me, just on Sunday, yesterday, there were 5 dolphins there. So the SAC at the moment is working healthily at the moment, because I was at the beach there yesterday, and all the tourists. One tourist actually came up to me and asked me what time we feed the dolphins. Yeah, I know, and I'll say no more. But and I said 4:30. So anyway, thank you for attending today, and hopefully we'll get a future update from yourself, Sarah, as things progress with this. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.